Hi, everybody. I'm Audrey Moore with Audrey Helps Actors, and this is episode number 60. Sexy 60. Like a fine wine, this podcast gets better with age. Hi, everybody. OMG. Self-Tape May is blown up, you guys. It's so exciting. I'm so inspired by watching everybody. The tape that you put on your body gives me life. I'm not going to lie. Like when I scroll through and I go to hashtag Self-Tape May and I see all of the tape and all of you holding tape and some of you licking tape with your own proclivity. It's great. I love it. All of it inspires me. It gives me so much life. And I hope that you are being inspired by it and for it and to it. I hope you're just brimming and with inspiration abound. So today's episode, we are actually going to air the audio from my conversation with Risa. But don't leave yet. If you listen to it, don't leave. Don't leave, stay, because we have some important things to discuss that were not a part of the conversation I had with Risa Bramon Garcia at BGB Studio, casting director, actor advocate. Normally we do our interstitials in the middle of the episode. We're doing our listener questions about lighting and sound. Then we're going to address exploitation during a time of economic recession, how you can protect your health, safety, and pay during a time where people want to take it away from you. So we're going to talk about these things before the episode, just because a lot of you went ahead and were participants in the live, which I'm so grateful to, all of you who tuned in to the live episode. And we are going to talk about our story episode. I need everyone to do me a solid. Our episode is going to air June 1st. So on June 1st, we are going to announce the winner of Self-Tape May, and we are going to release the first ever story episode. We get tons of people who write in about story. Audrey, I don't understand what you mean when you say story. Please, I need to understand story. We're talking about story. I need you to watch Finding Nemo. I need you between now and then to rewatch or watch for the first time if you are one of those people, which I just have to say, if you've never watched Finding Nemo, I don't even know what you've been doing with your life. But I need you to watch Finding Nemo, and then the story episode will make sense. So Finding Nemo, story episode by June 1st. Watch it. Don't watch a trailer. You got to watch the whole thing. Watch it, because we really get into story, okay? So I first want to shout out all of these iTunes reviews. OMG, I can't believe how many iTunes reviews you give me. Your iTunes reviews are like if I woke up and then my mom called me and then she said, I just want you to know I'm really proud of you. That's what your iTunes reviews do to my wounded inner child. So I want to thank you so very much. Shout out to Randy Washington 8, JB Bowersfeld, Plabady, Natalie Jean K, Rose Nerdy Wife, Anne 887, and Cherie Abate, Ashley Buchanan, Cece the actor, Shay Rosemart, Anna Carolina Friere. All right. Thank you so much for the iTunes reviews. They really do help. I appreciate you so much. All right. So to recap, this episode is with Risa Bramon Garcia. We did a Instagram live yesterday that was about self-taping tips. So that is Self-Tape May. I wanted somebody who is not only a long-term casting director, she's been casting for 40 years, some of the greatest projects ever to hit the big screen or small. She has been watching and teaching about self-tapes for years, and so she has a lot that she says about what really matters, what doesn't matter, some techniques, some tricks. I come at it as an actor to tell you about some of the things that I've had success in, some of this things I've noticed other actors, friends of mine who booked off of tape, what that really is. So this is a really great episode to sort of hunker down and get some information about self-tapes and how to make them successful. This episode is also brought to you by singinglessonslosangeles.com. That's singinglessonslosangeles.com. Greg Saffel, I can't tell you how many of these Zoom things I'm hearing about casting directors who are doing like Zoom generals, and all of them are talking about special skills. Do you have special skills? And a lot of you are singers that have left your singing dormant, and now is a fantastic time to, contact Greg. He does lots of virtual voice lessons and get your voice working again. Activate your voice. Many of you also have vocal issues in general. You aren't on voice. You don't have a lot of vocal range. You don't understand what your voice does in the sense of informing the characters and the types that you play. So these are all really important things that is perfect for you to start working on right now during quarantine while we wait for production to pick back up. I couldn't recommend him more highly. He is affordable. He is magical. Greg Saffel, singinglessonslosangeles.com. Also by Buckley Sampson. We're going to talk about what you should be doing right now during the recession. I was here for the '08 recession. We're going to talk about what are some things that you can focus on. But a really great thing you can focus on is getting your package together. Production's on hold. And one thing that happens is that people don't spend the time they actually need to really invest in making sure their marketing materials are up to par because they feel like they don't have time. They feel like they're behind. People are booking jobs and they feel like I have to be one of the people that are booking jobs. So they start taking shortcuts. Now is a time where there aren't jobs. So now is a great time for however long that lasts to be putting effort, attention, focus into your materials. So Buckley is a fantastic headshot stylist. I couldn't recommend her more highly. She has an episode from season 1 that I so recommend. It is a game changer in understanding how to make headshots effective. Buckley Sampson at imagebybuckley.com. All right, it's time to talk about lighting.
Help me. I need some help.
And now it's time for listener questions.
I'm so scared.
This listener question is brought to you by singinglessonslosangeles.com. So I just told you all about how great Greg is. Now is the time. Now is the time to be working on your voice. You're at home anyway. He does them virtually. He's wonderful. He's helped me work on my voice. Now is a fantastic time to work on your vocal clarity, to work on your vocal strength. He's affordable. He's fantastic. Greg Saffel, singinglessonslosangeles.com. Okay, so now let's talk about lighting. We are getting so many questions about lighting, and you guys have discovered what Hollywood already knew, which is that lighting is very challenging. I want you to know that if you're experiencing that it is difficult to light yourself well, that's correct. There is an entire department that is devoted to the art of lighting. Luckily, I am married to somebody who knows a lot about this, so I'm going to introduce my incredible and so handsome husband. But before I do, I want to talk to you about his qualifications. So Jesse is the son of what is called a gaffer. So if you are not familiar with set terminology, the gaffer is the person that is in charge of lighting. His dad has been doing this since the 70s. He has worked on almost all of J.J. Abrams stuff. He started with some of the really famous projects like Heat. Those of you who remember Lost, he worked on Lost. He worked on Batman, Superman. He's just worked on everything. And Jesse's name is, in fact, Lumen. That's because his dad is a lighting nerd. So Jesse took what his dad taught him, and he is a filmmaker. And he has been creating, writing, producing, directing, editing content for years now. He has also DP'd and managed the look and light of really almost the entire majority of his work. So he has definitely put in his 10,000 hours. So I'm very fortunate in that I have somebody who is understanding lights and lighting to help me with my setup. I've posted some of my self-tapes and everyone is like, "Oh my God, Audrey, your lighting is so great. How did you do that?" And I'm like, I married a filmmaker. So I'm going to pass this over to Jesse, and he's going to talk about why lighting is its own art form and what the challenges are and some things to look out for. So, Jesse, lighting is its own art form, correct?
Yep. Lighting is indeed its own art form. And in fact, it's a really complicated art form when you pull back the curtain and look at what's happening behind the scenes. Think about a film set. You have a gaffer, you have a best boy, you have grips and electricians, you have an entire crew whose whole job it is to be in charge of light. And even with this army of specialists, it always takes them hours to set up the lights. That's how complicated light can get. So if your light isn't working out in your self-tape, don't beat yourself up too much because it's a really hard thing to do. But I'm going to try to give you some little tips and tricks along the way that'll hopefully help you out here. So some of the things that make lighting a little more challenging than you might otherwise think is the color of light. So now our eyes do this kind of magical thing where they automatically white balance any light we're looking at to make it look like it's white light coming out of that light. When in actuality, there is no white light. Every light has a different color to it. So take, for instance, the sun. The light that comes out of the sun is really blue. So now when you're walking down the street, you don't realize that. It just feels like everything's lit up by kind of this white light, right? But if you take a camera and walk down the street and you don't white balance the camera for the sun, you'll notice that everything is actually bathed in blue light. And now if you did that same thing inside, most of our inside lights are actually orange. So if you take a camera and walk around inside and you don't white balance it for those lights, your whole apartment, your whole house will look orange because we are in fact being bathed in orange light. And so you may want to take that into consideration when you're setting up your self-tapes. If you're using a window as your main source of light, flipping on this light switch to give yourself a little extra light may not be the best solution. If you need a little more light, you may want to invest in some daylight-timed light bulbs. Those are bulbs that are blue. They will give off a very similar color light to the light that's coming in through your window. Or if you're using mostly indoor lights, you may want to block out the light from the window, as that's mixing the colors that are coming through, which unless you're using that as some sort of artistic choice, may not be the best thing to do. There's also different qualities of light. There's hard light and there's soft light. Now, hard light tends to make things look a little harsher. It gives off more defined shadows. It makes things look a little more stark, a little more rough. And soft light softens things a little bit. It makes less shadows, and the shadows that it does make are a little softer. They don't have hard edges. And soft light is generally what we use to light stars. If a star has a close-up, often it will be a soft light source that we're using. So generally when you're shooting a self-tape, you'll want to use soft light. Now sometimes you can use hard light depending on what the tone of the project is or what it's asking for. But I would say 9 times out of 10, you'll probably want to be using soft light. And the way to make your light soft, there are a couple ways to do that. Now in general, hard light is direct light. So think about if the sun is shining directly through your window right on you. That is really hard light. And a way to make it softer is to put up some sheer curtains. That creates what we call diffusion. It's diffusing the light. It's making it softer. Another example is if you're using a light inside. Let's say you have a ring light or a softbox, and you're just pointing it directly at your face. Now, there may be some soft light coming through, especially if you have a softbox, but it may not be as soft as you want it to be. What you'll want to try to make it a little softer is instead of pointing it directly at you, turn it around and point it at the wall, or tilt the light up so that it's pointing at the ceiling. This trick will only work if you have a fairly powerful light and the room is small enough so that it'll still illuminate you with just that light. But it's worth a try if things are looking a little too harsh for you. Now, we're getting a lot of questions about ring lights versus soft boxes versus natural sunlight. All of them are great in different ways. All of them come with trade-offs. Now, ring lights are great for their portability. They're simple to set up. They're simple to dim up and down. They're really small. If you're traveling, you can put them in a suitcase. If you don't have very much room where you're shooting your self-tape, a ring light can be really great. You also may have to set it up pretty close to you when you're filming, and that can be a little distracting because you have sort of this bright thing in your face as you're shooting, which, may be something that you want to get used to, because when you're on set, oftentimes that happens. There's these big distracting lights right in your face, and you kind of have to figure out a way to act through that. So although it's a downside, it may be, something that you should practice so that you get used to it. And now softboxes will give you a softer light, but they're kind of a pain in the neck to set up. Once you do set them up, they're really big and bulky. And so if you have a small place, they may not be the best thing to have, because you don't want to break them down and set them up every single time. It's kind of like assembling and disassembling IKEA furniture every time you want to do a self-tape. You can, once you have them up, leave them up, but then you've got this giant light that you got to store somewhere, which isn't a problem if you have a garage or if you have a larger house or whatever it is, but maybe a problem if you've got a small apartment. So I usually recommend people, if they can, use soft boxes, just because they're a little more versatile than ring lights are, but they do come with a lot of those downsides if you have a smaller place. And as far as natural light goes, like sunlight, if you have a big window and you can put some sheer curtains on it, that will often be the most flattering light, because it's a large light source that, if you put those sheer curtains there, is a soft light. That often makes you look the most flattering. But the downside is, obviously, you can't really control that light. The window's where it is. You can't move that window over to the left or the right if you need to be in a different space or look at a different background or whatever it is. You're stuck with what you got. So if you're lucky enough to have a window in the right space, then you may be set for the most part. Now, besides the color and the quality of light, other things to keep in mind when you're doing these self-tapes are things like the tone of the project that you're working on. So if the self-tape you're shooting is something for a comedy, generally those are a little lighter, a little more fun, a little brighter. You'll generally want to light the whole room a little brighter, but if you're shooting something a little moodier, a little more dramatic, something dark, maybe it's a heavy drama or a horror film or something like that, you may want things to look a little moodier. You may want the room to look a little darker. You may not want to be completely lit. You may want kind of half of your face falling into the darkness a little bit. Obviously light it so that they can still see you, but maybe part of your face isn't quite as lit, right? So you want to put that light, instead of right in front of you, maybe put that light a little more to the side. Maybe so that it's only lighting the right side of your face, and the left side of your face is a little bit darker. It just looks a little more moody. In general, you may want to look at the show that you're filming the audition for, or some movies that are similar to the movie that you're filming your audition for, and see what the lighting looks like in those shows or those movies. And to go even farther, maybe find a scene that's similar to your scene and see how that's lit, and see if you can, you don't have to get it perfect, but if you can kind of hint at that tone, hint at that lighting, play around with it, see if you can get as close as you can to it without going crazy. Remember, there's a whole team of experts that are creating that image. So you may not be able to get it to what they're doing because you don't have a whole crew and $1 million lighting package to do it. But you can maybe hint towards that direction. Audrey and I have done self-tapes where, it's a horror film and she's supposed to be in the closet hiding from the bad guy. And if you're watching her do that scene in a brightly lit room versus watching her, even if it's in the same room, but sitting down, everything's dark and she's barely lit by this lantern, it makes you feel a little more like you're connected to the story. It makes you feel a little more like you're in it, right? And that can give you the edge over somebody else. Now, another thing that people are asking about is shadows. How do you get rid of shadows? Now, there's a few ways to get rid of shadows on the wall. The first way, the easiest way, if you can do it, is to step away from the wall. The farther away you are from the wall, the less likely you are going to be casting a shadow on the wall. So if you have a little space and you can film yourself a little bit farther away from the wall, try that first. Another way to get rid of shadows is to make the lighting softer. So try some of those tips I was talking about in that section of hard light versus soft light. Point it at a wall, put up a sheer curtain, that sort of thing, and see if that helps. See if that brings the shadows down. And the final thing that you may want to try as a last resort are the editing tools that you're using. So whether that's on a computer or even on your iPhone or whatever device you have, you can use some of the effects on there to reduce the look of shadows, but this is really as a last resort. That is a whole other can of worms. Just in the same way that you have an entire crew of people that are working on the light, you have another entirely different crew of people who are using post-production tools. So give it a try. Try some of the presets they have. Move around some of the sliders. See if anything works for you. But if it doesn't work for you, don't beat yourself up. What we're doing is hard. Self-tapes, they seem like a simple thing, but really they can get real complicated real fast. And that's because they're asking you to really do the job of a lot of different people. If you were on set, you would have a makeup artist, you would have a hairstylist, you would have a whole crew of people doing the lights, you would have a whole other crew of people doing the camera, you would have another crew of people doing all the post, you would have a director there to help you get the right performance, you would have another professional actor there also helping you with the performance, and you don't have any of that. And so strive to do the best you can. Good luck, and don't beat yourself up. What we're doing is hard.
And now let's have a brief discussion about sound. So sound is important, obviously. There are some things that some people do differently. I offer on the website a link to a lav mic available on Amazon. You just want to test it and make sure that the sound with the lav mic is better than the sound without the lav mic. You'll need a little dongle, which is a little white little dongle if you have an iPhone. So you have your microphone that connects to the dongle that connects to the iPhone. So you'll need all three pieces. Many of you might already own a dongle because you're trying to put in your earphones or things like that to listen to something on your iPhone. But just know it's a required part of connecting the lav mic, which is a little mic that connects basically to your shirt. You want to have it connect to you and your person. That said, be aware of, touching the lav mic, having your hair scrape against it, things like that. You can really ruin a take by that being a problem. I've also experienced that if you are putting the lav mic into an iPhone case and then into the iPhone, that often the sound won't get picked up. I ruined an entire 2 hours of a taping session for a really important audition because it was connected to my case and therefore the sound wasn't picked up at all. Not even the actual sound from, the phone. It was silent, 100% silent, and I cried for the entire evening. So there's that. There are directional mics that you can get if you want to get really high tech. I just don't personally find them to be very accessible. Sound is important, but as you will hear in this discussion, really making sure that you are connecting to the reader, making sure that you are impacting people is really of vital importance. What I also really like about the lav mic is it will pick you up more than it will pick up the sound of the reader. So part of what's hard when you're self-taping is that the reader is close to the camera. And if you don't have a lav mic, then you hear the reader louder than you might hear you, and that can be distracting. So the mic being attached to you can make it easier for them to hear you over the reader so that you steal the show, not your reader. Another thing that I've done in the past is instead of attaching the lav mic directly to me, I attach the lav mic to like a light stand or something like that that's just out of frame, but close to me and farther away from the reader. That way it's picking me up more than it is the reader, but I'm not sort of self-conscious about touching it or it hitting my hair or any of that sort of you hear like some rustling that you don't want to hear. So if it's a scene where maybe I'm doing something physical and there's something that needs to happen and the lav mic being attached to me is going to be in the way, then I might attach it to a little stand or something just out of frame. Another thing to consider is I get a lot of questions of does that bother anyone? Is it distracting to wear the lav mic if you're watching an audition and you see the little mic attached to somebody's shirt? Is it distracting to them? And I want you to know, no, it is not distracting to them. They want sound to be good, and they understand that you are taking the step to make sure that your sound is a priority and that we hear your read more than we hear the reader's read. They are perfectly capable, and I promise you, nobody loses a role because they had a lav mic on their shirt. I promise you, promise you, promise you. In fact, many casting offices now, when you go in to read, theatrical and commercial, they'll actually clip a lav mic to you so that the sound quality is its best. So that's a trend that's happening in general in casting offices and is something that is definitely acceptable and widely understood throughout the entire industry. So that's my recommendation. If you're going to experiment with actual mics and directional mics, they get more complicated, just like lighting can get complicated. So I think just a general, solid lav mic is best. Another thing to consider about sound is echo. We particularly record this podcast in a room in our place that has lots of carpet, lots of rugs, lots of bedding. So all those things absorb sound. So if you're ever shooting something and they put mats on the floor, a lot of what that does is it just absorbs the sound because you can hear a lot of echo. Some people ask questions about, what about blocking out the sound from the windows, things like that, some sound from outside of your house or apartment. Well, I just want you to know that's where it really gets complicated. And you have to make a sort of life choice, right? If you want to get some foam and block out your windows and add foam as though you were in a sound booth. So you see that if you just Google a picture of foam in a sound booth, you'll see this foam and it absorbs sound and it prevents sound from coming in from outside places and keeps the sound inside of the place you're recording. It keeps it there. So that's a choice that you have to make. I personally decided not to block out my windows because I'm keeping my space as a sort of multifunctional space. It's an office. I also do self-tapes here. I record the podcast here. And I have good enough mics and also a good enough lav that I find that it's not a problem. Sometimes they're doing construction in the building. I have literally gone downstairs and been like, hi, can you give me 20 minutes and stop working just for 20 minutes? You got to do sometimes what you got to do. But if you want to block out your windows and that sound, then just Google, making your room soundproof, and you'll see lots of instructions on how to pad your room and pad windows so that it is more conducive to expert sound. But again, I just haven't heard anyone who's lost a role because of that. A lot of people book roles in hotel rooms, you guys. And I recommend having a lav that you can plug into your phone The ring light kit that I have is travelable. That's why I chose it. Having a little stand that's travelable. That's why I chose the stands I chose. You put them in your luggage, you carry it all with you, and that way you can do your best work no matter where you are.
We interrupt your regularly scheduled program to bring you shit you didn't know about your union.
This shit you don't know about your union is brought to you by Buckley Sampson. Buckley Sampson saves headshots. That's what she does. She saves headshot sessions. She is a stylist. She styles many things, but one of her specialties is styling actors for headshots. So gone are the days of you just going ahead and wearing your favorite shirt and hoping that just sort of generally shows your personality. You may not be a person who has any concept of how what you wear translates in front of the camera. Like lighting, there is an entire department to wardrobe and costume, and that's because it's really an art form to choose the right clothes that tell the right story about the casting and the person that you are portraying. So Buckley takes that understanding and applies it directly to the headshot. I couldn't recommend her more highly. She is a dear friend of mine. She is extremely talented and skilled. She looks at your casting. She looks at what you're trying to achieve and the genre in which you're trying to achieve it and helps you pick out outfits in a price range that you can afford. Often works with stuff that you already own to help you make choices for your headshots, to put your best foot forward, so that way the headshots say what you are actually wanting them to say. That's Image by Buckley. Buckley Sampson. I love, adore her. She's fantastic. So now I really want to have a heart-to-heart with everybody about exploitation during a recession. And I really want to talk about the union and how it was founded. Our union, SAG-AFTRA, originally SAG, before we merged with AFTRA, was founded during the Great Depression. And it was founded out of a need and desire to protect workers in front of the camera. I want to be very clear that the Actors Union, SAG-AFTRA, it is a beautiful yet fragile body that requires a lot of attention and care and love and support. It came at a time when the Great Depression hit in the 1930s and New York theaters were shut down. Broadway was shut down, Theater Road was shut down, and a lot of actors, they made the transition from New York theater over to Hollywood and began to put themselves in pictures. And what they discovered was that the recession occurred and the studios hired what was called efficiency experts. So these experts were brought in by studios to slash actors' salaries by as much as 50%. So just as this always happens, the people at the top don't want to take the pay cut. So what they do is they try to slash the price of what they pay to the laborers. And a handful of actors saw what was happening, and these were actors who had experience with Actors' Equity and creating a union for theater. And they decided that that was not acceptable. And they created this incredible, I'll get super emotional talking about it, beautiful movement to protect the working actor. So right now is a time when scam artists come out to get you. Now is a time where desperation comes creeping in. And you may be getting phone calls from representation. You might be getting phone calls from producers. You might be getting phone calls from people who are going to ask you to work what is called off the card. So to do work that is non-union, even though you're a union actor. Or they may ask you and make it sound like it's no big deal to become a dues-paying non-member through something called FICOR, Financial Core. So I'm going to direct you guys to a group of actors called Union Working. And union working is a group of actors who make themselves readily available to actors to understand what all these things are. What are the damages? What is FICOR really? What is working off the card really? They have interviews. They have a podcast where they have talked to actors who were scammed into making that decision. And they talk very openly about the results of that upon their careers. If you are being asked or enticed or scammed to make choices that don't benefit the union, I want you to reach out to somebody and get some clarity on that. The people at Union Working have an email that you can reach out to them. The email is info@unionworking.com. That's info@unionworking.com, just so you can sort of have somebody that you can talk to. I know talking to the union can be scary. I know you want to talk to people that you can trust. You're not sure. You're getting pressured. When anyone's pressuring you to do something and it has to be a choice that's made really fast, that's all indicative of what a scam artist does. So just be very aware of that. Corporations, when left up to their own devices, they will sacrifice the health, safety, and overall well-being of the workers because their interest is the bottom line, and it's not personal. It just is what it is. And the union is not perfect. It is not an easy win because we are going up against literally the largest companies in the world, and it takes a lot of fortitude and strength to come against them and to come out winning. And it is actors who are volunteering their time to make sure that our rights, life, living wage, safety is protected. And I think that's an incredibly beautiful and valuable thing. And so I really want to thank you all for that. I want to thank everyone for holding the line. I really want to thank everyone for all of their time and attention and passion and love to this union that is such a important and vital part of all of us continuing to have fair pay, fair treatment, and safety.
And now back to your regularly scheduled program.
Audrey helps actors because they don't know anything.
Hi.
Let's see. Hi, how are you?
I'm great. How are you?
Great. Thanks so much. All right, everybody. Hi. So maybe we'll give everybody a second. Hi, Alicia. Hi, everybody. Hi. So hi, Laurel. Hi. Okay, we've got a great group that are joining us.
Yeah, I see that, and they'll keep joining, I'm sure.
I'm
as
sure.
We go.
Yeah. So Risa, why don't we go ahead and start? Why don't you tell everybody a little bit about yourself for any who could possibly not know who you are, and then we'll just get into our topic.
Hi, I'm Risa. And I'm a human in COVID quarantine, like the rest of you.
That's right.
So I'm a casting director, teacher, run the BGB studio with my partner, Steve Braun, and an advocate for actors.
That's right.
You can all look me up at some point. And I've known Audrey for many, many years. And we've collaborated in class. And
that's right.
On our podcast, your podcast, many things. So we just want to be here and offer our support during your amazing Self-Tape May.
Thanks,
which is in the midst. How's that going?
I think Self-Tape May is blowing up. I'm every day I open my phone and I just have like 100 notifications every hour of people who are tagging me in their Self-Tape Mays. And I'm so inspired by everyone's attack. And I just really want to encourage everyone, if you haven't started yet, or if you feel like you've fallen a little bit off the wagon, any practice is good practice. And I think it's good to sort of use this time during quarantine and also during May. I did it in May because it was a time of the month or of the year when it was generally slow in the business anyway. And so to use the time to sort of keep your morale up, when there aren't auditions coming in. And
who would have anticipated that 2020 May would be this?
Boy, I sure didn't. I will tell you what. I mean, there are scientists who did, and I was not one of them. So,
we will get it. We will get into
that. Yeah, exactly.
But here we are.
So you and I are going to be discussing tope as part of Self-Tape May. I hope this adds some clarity and some inspiration to the actors who are participating or are going to participate in Self-Tape May. And so I asked our followers and listeners for some questions, and we have a list here that I think is really, really valuable. So the first one is actually my question. It's something that
great.
I really want to know about. I have lots of friends who booked off of Self-Tape, and I booked off of Self-Tape. And something that I have found is that a previous relationship with somebody on the other side is valuable, whether that's casting director, whether that's somebody who's a creative, a producer, something like that. How much do you see previous relationships having an influence on the tape being booked?
The tape being booked, like as getting the job?
As getting the job, yeah, I would say.
I mean, I think it speaks to building up a history and a wealth and a body of work that people start to love and share.
Yes.
Because we all have people who we advocate for because we know them so well. And that group of actors grows and grows and grows.
Right.
So the reason why I love people sending in self-tapes is that it gives us all an opportunity to grow our love for those people. And I think if you do have history with people, on one hand, there's a sense of, we've always liked that person. We've loved their self-tapes before. We've loved their work before. And so you're now in people's top of mind for people.
Great.
But I've also seen, and recently in this pilot that I just did, tons of actors who producers did not know at all, and are seeing their work, their self-tape work or their audition work in the studio, and they're being blown away because it's fresh and new and exciting.
Yes, I love that.
But it all, like, relationships are built by doing great work that people love and can advocate for time after time.
Great. So I really want to encourage everyone to hear what I hear on that is that just because maybe this self-tape doesn't book the job, that in doing great work, you are doing something in getting a little bit further in developing a relationship.
Oh, totally.
Because I think one of the things that happens with self-tapes, speaking for myself as an actor, is it does feel like they're going into the void, right? And we have no idea really if they've been seen, how much of them been seen, anybody. And at least when you get the audition, you know you're one of X amount of people who've gotten into the room. You're being seen by the casting director. You may or may not have any confidence whether you can actually judge how the casting director felt about it, which is a whole different thing. But there's a feeling of tangibility when you get in the room that's taken away in the self-tape. And so encouraging actors to see this self-tape as just another opportunity for casting and creatives as a whole to see your work and become fans, that it may not be this time.
And here's a great example. So somebody I know really well, she actually works at our studio, and she read the script because I wanted everyone to read the script in this pilot I was working on. And she was so moved by this role that she did a self-tape without being solicited or anything. And she sent it to me. And I remember opening up the email on a Sunday night going, of course I'm going to watch it. She was like, it doesn't matter if you watch it or don't watch it. I just felt so close to this and so compelled to do this. I did this for me, but I wanted to share it with you. Anyway, long story short, I was blown away. I sent it to my producers as part of a group of self-tapes and auditions for that role. And self-tapes are being used more and more and more and more and more now than ever before. And now we're in this virtual space. We can talk about what all that is. But in any case, they were blown away by her. They didn't know her. No one knew her. She doesn't have an agent right now. It was just one of those, like, I get this. She got it. She spoke to them. The producers, the writers, showrunners loved her, went on to studio, went on to network. She's still, we got shut down in the midst, as many people did, but still very, very high in everybody's mind. And so and so now she has a relationship with those people. Yeah, that's awesome. Now they love her. And whether she gets this part or not, she's one of three who are like the favorites by everybody. Everybody will remember her because she did such strong, personal, present work. And so your self-tape isn't going to be, people are going to fall in love with you and develop relationships with you if you're just churning out self-tapes that don't have that kind of presence to them. And that's, to me, the most important thing I want to communicate here, because I think that people get so caught up in other things that they forget about the real work, the work that is affecting, the work that's going to get people to fall in love with you, remember you, want to see you again, and where those relationships happen is when they're affected deeply, comedy or not, drama or not, really affected deeply by your work. And when you send stuff in, where your agent sends stuff in, here's the great news. Casting directors are watching more and more self-tapes than ever before. Yes, there are more to watch, but they are really, everyone is looking at self-tapes with an open mind beyond anything that's ever happened. And so it's an incredible opportunity. And, your stuff may impact them or not, it may get seen or not, but the likelihood of it getting seen is greater now than ever before.
I think that's wonderful. Yeah, that's really great. Okay, so our second question is, another question I had, are CDs and creatives going to expand Zoom and Skype callbacks? Because now there's talk about not being able to go into the room and have, callbacks are sort of like it's like a not real thing anymore theatrically anyway. But more and more, especially for these larger roles, for these recurring roles, they want to be in the room with people. They want to, have a work session. Do you see?
Sometimes, but not always.
Not always.
Lately, people are casting even series regulars and leads in movies off of tape, and starting to do virtual interviews and virtual audit. So I was educating some showrunners the other day about what this Zoom experience is, because I am living on Zoom in class, and at the studio we're having meetings on Zoom and teacher conferences and interviews and workshops, and all of our classes are on Zoom, and we are seeing the most spectacular work. There's something about this forum, this experience that is translating into personal, present, dropped in, loose, cool work. And so I've been explaining that to people, and they're excited to meet actors in this virtual space, and also to look at the work that's recorded in this virtual space. This is what we have now, and it's powerful. It's useful, and I know that we'll all be working in this way at least for the next 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And who knows what will happen after that, because last week there was no pilot season. Now pilots are going to happen nobody really knows what's coming.
I know.
So all we can do is be where we're at.
Yeah.
But I love this Zoom virtual online experience where people can have honest conversations and storytelling. Just like it's amazing, and it's powerful, and you guys need to start getting really familiar with this, comfortable with this, and seeing its power and its use, which is so friggin' cool.
Well, this brings me to a question that's a little bit later, but I think it's a good time to talk about it. Somebody had asked, what do we feel about when we don't have an actual scene partner? So how do you feel about self-taping with a virtual scene partner using WeAudition or a friend over Zoom, etc.? I'm specifically wondering in terms of submitting those self-tapes for a role when it's clear that there's no one in the room with you. Does that look like amateur hour? So I would imagine that A, everyone has to have some empathy right now, first of all.
Yeah.
B, with what you're saying about as work sessions and stuff become more of a common thing for virtual experiences, that learning how to act and connect with somebody and have it be engaging when the person's not actually there is maybe going to be a helpful skill that might be worth developing.
Yeah. It's a great question, and I get it. And yes, people are more empathic now. And this is all just breaking down all the formality. Like, we are all in the lo-fi world. Celebrities are in the lo-fi world. Politicians are in the lo-fi world. And actors, and we're all, here we are right now. We're all in this online, social media friendly virtual space. So we all get it. And people, the standards for fancy whatever are gone, because all we want to do is connect and be with each other in the work or in life. And so everyone is forgiving, and I think it's going to change things. I think it's going to break down all the rules to a place of, we just want to feel you, in the story. And so, yeah, I mean, the most important thing, and one of the things I see as one of the biggest issues with self-tapes is that people act alone.
Yes, right.
People just act alone. So the camera's on me, and here I am just performing by myself in some void. Everything has to be about your scene partner, about the person in the story with you, who you're talking to, how you're trying to affect them. So whether they're sitting there in your living room with you, or whether they're on your iPad next to you, I would say try to have another human being somewhere in your sphere, even if they are on an iPad or a phone or a computer, so that you're talking to another human being.
So one of the things that I feel like you say in your class, which I really connect to, is don't treat your self-tapes with the same like stiffness and staleness and like panic almost that you do in an in-person audition. Like don't do that in a real audition anyway, but definitely don't treat the self-tape with that same sort of like, I'm in this empty vacant room and I just have to sort of deal with it sort of attitude, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's something in people's minds where you think, oh, well, the casting directors are going to want me to recreate my worst audition experience, just to like, what happens when I get into a room and I stand stiffly in front of a wall and I just say some words. And just to go back to what we were saying before we got disconnected, when whoever you're talking to, you are doing a scene because you want to affect another human being and be affected by another human being. So whether they're on your iPad or your phone or your computer next to you, or they're in the room with you, you're having a relationship, virtually or not. That's about 2 people or 10 people or whatever in a story, in a situation, in a relationship. That's the most important thing, and that's what often you guys give up. And so I would just really encourage you to remember this is your take. You know, when the camera is on you, sure, it's your take, but it doesn't mean you stop being in a scene. It doesn't mean you stand there stiffly or sit there. And I think a lot of that comes from worrying about the technology and worrying about like eye lines and worrying about lighting and worrying about your words and all the things that keep you from being human and present in the story. And so if you could think of this more like, I'm going to my friend's house and I'm going to make a little movie and this is my side of it. This is my take of it. Like, how would you perform? How would you act? How would you show up if you were doing that for a friend versus I'm presenting myself for a casting director in some stiff, and I'm not saying
No, I get you. I think a lot of people do though, because they get into this like stiff audition place. I'd love for you to answer this question because I think it's so important. So
cool.
You had said one of your rules is with self-tapes, there are no rules. So can you talk a little bit about that and your experience of receiving self-tapes and then who gets cast and what?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, you should follow the directions that are sent to you by casting directors because they're there for a reason. So if they want to see a full body shot or they want you to do a medium close-up or they want you to, do something specific, like listen to what they have to say and follow their directions. They're there for a reason. They're not just doing that to make things hard for you, but then forget about all that.
Yeah.
And when I say don't, the whole point of it is, and I was saying this before I got lost in the ether and the internet issues. There's something about actors getting stuck in technology, in rules, in shoulds and shouldn'ts, in like, I heard this once from this casting director, I heard this once from my agent, I was told to do this, and then suddenly like, you're not acting like from your heart. You're not telling the story in the scene. You're not engaged in a real relationship in the story. You're just worrying about all this stuff. So I just say, throw that stuff out the window and just come back to the heart of the work in the scene. Come back to the story you're telling. Come back to doing this as if you were making a little movie. And how would you work? I just ask all of you to answer this question for yourself. How would you work if you showed up for a friend's short, or if you showed up on set, or if you showed up to a rehearsal, or to read someone's screenplay out loud? You would show up to do the work for its own sake, to serve the story, to bring your own point of view to the relationship and the character, as opposed to getting caught up in all the other crap that literally shuts you down. So what I just say is, like take all those rules and ideas of shoulds and shouldn'ts and know that if you send in work that is personally affecting you and meaningful to you, and you're engaged in a human story and you show up that way and send that in and affect your audience, the casting director, the showrunner, the filmmaker, the director, the writer, if you affect them, nobody cares about any of the other stuff. They're not going to get caught up in backgrounds. They're not going to get caught up in rules. They're going to get, they're going to be moved by you. And one of the things I just noticed because I do these self-tape classes and I'm loving doing them and we're having a blast in there and people are transforming overnight. Nothing happens overnight, but they're getting it. Is that when I show self-tapes that I love, actors say, oh my God, it looks like that person is on set. It looks like they're actually in the movie. They're like, and so what is the thing that keeps you guys from doing that kind of work in a self-tape? Like why of course you don't have to be perfect and even word perfect. You have to know it and it's got to be in your bones and you should, spend that time learning it. But you need to be doing the kind of work that is going to say to them, and I hear this from producers all the time and directors and showrunners and executives, oh, that feels like our show, or that feels like what our show could be, or go to ready for wardrobe. You need to be doing that championship level work where you can walk into your self-tape in a way where you are surrendering to the story and you're doing the kind of work that you would do if you walked on set. So what is keeping you from that? What is keeping you from showing up that fully?
Yeah, I do think what I experience is a lot of people put two things. I think people put a lot of emphasis on the technology being right or wrong, in the sense of they don't want to, they don't want to, should they use props? Shouldn't they use props? Should they sit down? Should they not sit down? Should I, how tight is the frame? Or how much of their body and what is it? And it's like all this sort of, chaos that then distracts from the actual work. And then I also see people who put a really high level of production into their self-tapes. I mean, they go to locations and they get their hair done and they do all of this stuff. And then the work isn't as good as the production. It's like the production's really exciting, but then the work is like a level 5 to the production level 10. And I do know, I've seen so many, anytime a friend of mine books a job off of tape, I'm always like, what does your tape look like? And I've seen it all. I have seen it all, but what you're saying is I've experienced so much too, is that, the work is present, really engaging. There are clear relationships of who you're talking to and about. I understand the story, even if I have no idea what the story is, right? Yeah. And then I do get a sense of the tone of the show. I get a sense of the world of the show.
Yeah. And sometimes, like when you're doing a pilot or a movie and it's all new, there is no tone to adhere to.
Right, yeah.
But you understand in your bones what it's like to be in those shoes, in that person's experience, and you make a decision that is yours, and you interpret it, and it's okay. You might be wrong in some way, and they go, oh God, I love that person, and they're so present, and they're so there, but we want more this, like we want it to be angrier, or we want it to be sadder, or we want them to be more confrontational, but most of the time, and just to speak to that particular person I was mentioning before, who did that self-tape, the response was, we love her, but it feels like she may be a little too soft or vulnerable. And then, this is the thing that you guys don't know, perhaps, it starts to speak to, who is this character?
Right, yeah, right.
That character starts to be formed and realized and decided.
And you're a part of that process.
By the process. And you are now offering your point of view and your version of this to the process. So you're now showing up and they're going, oh, well, she should be tougher. Let's have her do it again and be tougher. But you know what? We liked it better when she wasn't quite that tough. So maybe, and then it speaks to the writing. So let's go back and rewrite the scene so that we see her vulnerability, but there are moments of toughness, and there are moments of softness, and there are moments where she's confronting, and there are moments when she's guarding her heart. And so you are now a collaborator in this, in the making of and realizing of that show. So but the thing that always inevitably affects the decision makers, whether whatever the production value is, or whatever the world is that you've created, is, are you in it Is this personal for you?
Yes.
Does this mean something to you?
Yes.
Are you bringing your specific clear voice to the story? Are you engaging with intention? Are you involved in the people you're talking to, whether they are in front of you or on a screen beside you? Are you specific and real and dropped in and truthful and right there in it, moment to moment, in real time, having an experience in the scene? And when you are, it will affect the viewer, and people will watch, because also you get 7 seconds, maybe 5, maybe 12,
and they turn it off
until somebody can put their finger on the button and go to the next person. And so so that's the kind of championship level work that you're all capable of, that needs to replace all the other, should I sit or should I stand, in my lighting. And if you're worried about that stuff and you're distracted by it, not only are you not able to do that kind of work, but also you end up, making yourself small, and you're all distracted, and people can't feel you. It's like, how do you take leadership and decide what this is? And sure, the writing should speak to you about tone, if it's a procedural, if it's a sci-fi, if it's a sitcom, all of that stuff. Right. But you get to decide where this lives in you, and offer that as a collaborator, as someone having your own artistic authority. You get to offer that to these people who are desperately trying to figure out what their show is.
Yes. I mean, one of the things you just said, which gets to our next question, is about, you said, you get those first 5 seconds, you get those first 7 seconds. And my analogy to it is, I'm such a huge reality competition show geek. And so on American Idol, if you don't get the first 5, 6, 7 seconds of the song, then you're spending the whole rest of the song catching up to being, whereas somebody who comes out and hits it from the get-go. And that is such a reality that is a part of self-tapes that is different from in the room. When you're in the room, they don't go, thanks so much, you didn't do it in the first 7 seconds, goodbye, right? And so a lot of actors have this question about being perfectionism-y, right? So, to prepare and then do 3 or 4 takes, or to have a rehearsal that you're sort of working on and then choose a take from the sort of taped rehearsal that you've done. I feel like for me, I think that's a personal choice. About whichever works best for you. But at the end of the day, how do we as actors, manage our perfectionism-ness? And I also want to caveat with this, Bright Daniels just did a Zoom where they talked about, if somebody gives a self-tape instead of going into the room, that their expectation is that the self-tape is really something, because you've got infinite time, you've got infinite takes. So if you're going to come in with a best take forward. And so I feel like we get that messaging, and so we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves of we got to put the best take forward. And then we're like, what is the best take? Because I don't even know. So, for me, so often I'm getting fake sides, if a script at all, I have no idea what the project is. I'm getting sides, that have literally nothing to do with the actual project. So I'm just totally flying blind, and then trying to do real personal work. But I feel this pressure to do the most mind-blowing Academy Award-winning performance of all time.
Well, I think you need to take that pressure off no matter what you're doing. If you get the job and you go to set, and you're working with some, heavyweight people who have been on a show for a long time, or they've been in they've been in tons of movies, and that's a whole other kind of pressure. So what is it so you need to find a way to take that pressure off of yourself, because really at the end of the day, nobody is going to respond to somebody trying to be perfect. There is no perfect. The perfect self-tape class that I teach is about there is no perfect. It's about, so you have to find a way to let go of all of that. And is the expectation that a self-tape is better than being in the room? Not for me. I feel like I want the same thing. I want to be affected by somebody. I want them to take leadership. I want them to walk in and say, you know what, this is where this is alive in me, and I want to engage in this story with you, and this is what I have to offer, and does this work for you, and does this make sense for you, and how will we find this together? And you can do that in a self-tape as well. And I think to say the expectation is higher is, especially these days, again, everybody's watching tons of self-tapes. So the only expectation is that, yes, you take care of whatever technology you need just so we can see you and feel you. And then you engage in the storytelling. And the great thing about doing it at home is you get to make a little movie at home today. This is what you get to do. And what I advocate for is not to do it like once and then watch it and once and watch it, or, cut and cut and cut. It's like when I'm directing, I will sometimes, at that moment where you get to the end of a scene and you feel like you just got it.
Yeah, right.
And I've done that in class, or I've done that when I've been directing, to say, all right, start from there, right there.
Right.
You know what that feels like.
Yes, right.
So what would it be like to do the scene 4 times in a row without cutting? You can cut it later. And if for those of you who are
100%.
saying, I don't know how to edit, you know what? Learn it. Like
You
really
have to.
Get right with the technology.
Get your
It's
iPhone, learn iMovie. It's
Yeah.
now, I know so many of you, and it's fine. Some of you, this is your first foray in getting your self-tape kit ready, Self-Tape May, which is a part of what Self-Tape May is about. And learning your editing is a huge part of that.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's not only is it not hard, it's super fun.
It's super fun. I agree.
There are
I'm similar.
6-year-olds who are editing now.
Yeah, I know, exactly.
Right.
So take that.
And I know someone who's actually doing an editing class for 10-year-olds online.
Hilarious.
Because the kids want to learn how to make movies.
Yeah.
So you can do it. If I can do it, and I'm an old dog.
Yes.
A
A 6-year-old can do it. You're not an old dog. You're a classy
but
lady.
You guys can do it. It's not that hard, and it's fun. So what would it be like to do the scene a few times in a row and then edit it so that you pick one that is like full and alive and it feels like, and you know what? It may be your first one, it may be your fourth one, but you can also do cool stuff going into it. You can improvise. You can do some miser repetition.
Yeah.
You can do some interesting prep before you get into it if you need to be in an emotional place. And so you have and then you can cut all that out. You can do a great improv with somebody and play with the scene and talk and feel it and do it in your own words and you can tape all of that.
Yes.
And so then some of you sometimes ask, well, I really like the beginning of my second take and I really love the end of my third take. And you know what? They're probably not as different as you think.
I know.
Because I've even tortured myself when I've had 2 great takes from somebody and I want to send them in from a self-tape or even in the audition room. And I'll think, I really love the beginning of that and the end of that. And then I realize it doesn't matter. The stronger beginning is great because that's when people are going to watch. And whether they fall in love with you or not, they may not watch the whole thing. They just have too much to do.
Yes.
It's no reflection on you.
Yeah.
But if you can start strong coming out of the gate, which is why, again, you can be in this wonderful place of presence before you start with whatever process, technique, practices you need to get there, and do it a few times.
I just want to preach to you on that. Because here's what I love about what you just said is that I find that to be so true. One of the disadvantages to going into the room is managing the waiting room, is managing the niceties. And you have this, totally different, dynamic with the casting director or the assistant. And, for some people, there's somebody's on their laptop, plus filming you, plus reading with you. It's like one person. And so it feels very discombobulating, and you've worked on it with your friend and you felt really engaged with your friend. But then seeing all the girls in the waiting room or the guys in the waiting room, and you just think, well, they're going to cast that. You go through all these mind games, right?
Mind games,
and
my God.
Then that can really throw you off for your moment before and starting solid when you get into the actual audition room for something in person. And what's wonderful about the self-tape is the self-tape really gives you an option to set the tone and have your moment before and not have to worry about all of that drama. I so agree with you. I think improving beforehand, if you have a take where you got really emotional at the end and you really feel like that's where the scene needs to start, you just go again.
Just go again.
You just go again.
Don't stop.
Don't
just
stop.
Go again.
And then
I
really like to take the takes that I sort of favorited, that I like and I look, and then I like to have somebody that I trust maybe take one or two takes and send them to 1 or 2 people that I really trust, people who are qualified that I trust, and say, what do you think? And the funny thing is, it's always, they never pick the take that I take, which is fine. But it's just, but they always pick the same take. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Yeah. Yeah. And it's great to get that kind of input if you can.
If you have somebody qualified,
qualified. Yeah. But I'll show my husband something I do. And he used to be in the business and he's the smartest person I know, but he'll just, again, speak to where, to me, he's qualified because he he knows how to say, this affected me, this didn't, or this one moved me, this one I saw the work, or whatever that is.
Yeah.
But and people ask all the time also based on that, should I send in 2 takes if I feel like they're different?
That's my next
and
question.
I would say, sure, if they're different.
Yeah.
Like sometimes people will
But nobody knows. I have to say, as an actor, I have no idea if they're different. I just want you to know.
If you don't know that they're not different. Here's an example.
Okay, good.
I just got 2 great self-tapes in from somebody who, one was really, really angry. Like this person was just in a really angry place in the story, like just really going after that person in a confrontational way. And it worked very, very well. They did another version of it where they were more manipulative. They were holding their cards close to their vest, so to speak, or chest, or whatever the expression is. They were a little more guarded. They still felt the same anger, but they were not going to give that to the other person, right? And so what was interesting about that tape was then other stuff came out at the end, right? So they got really upset at the end, really sad and upset. It was a very different. So those were completely different and both very, very valid. And for that, I was grateful to have both. And again, sent them to producers.
Yeah.
It started making them think about the character, the relationship, the story, the writing. And if you can be that affecting, if you can be that collaborative, then you are now in the process of figuring it out together. But if they're like a little bit this and a little bit that, and they're not that different, they're probably not that different.
I think that's great. If you can't tell if they're that different, then they're not that different. I think it's a good rule. And then I want to ask, if you're sending 2 takes, because I think a lot of actors just kind of feel like they can't choose, right? And so they send 2 takes and feel like you choose, right? Now, if somebody's going to send 2 takes, do you like 2 separate links so you can choose which link to send forward, or do you like 1 link?
I like separate links. I like separate links for, unless I would again follow the directions. Like, because some people like everything to be on one, like to do your slate,
everything.
Scene 1, scene 2, scene 3, all on 1 link. But I would say if you're going to send 2 takes of a scene, to have them separate, because otherwise the poor casting assistant has to do all your editing for you. And then you'll be looking at it and you'll go, oh my God, this is a 10-minute self-tape. Yeah. Well, there's a slate. There's scene 1 done twice, scene 2 done twice, scene 3 done twice. Now I have to sift through it and edit and cut it. It's like way too much work. And unless the work, and it's really frustrating. And often what we'll say is we'll go back to the person or the agent and say, you need to send these separately. I think so, to be safe, unless the instructions say keep them together and only send one take, then send them as separate links, as separate clips.
When I'm labeling the links, one of the insecurities that I have is that I'm like, take 1, take 2. And then I'm worried that then you send take 2, and then they're going to be like, let me see that take 1, and then the take 1 is not going to be what they're looking for. Is there a way I can label it so that it's not so clearly like, I've sent 2 takes, but you're only sending 1?
Well, we'll probably relabel it.
Okay, you'll relabel it.
And for starters, and don't worry about that. Nobody. If there's a showrunner, producer, a director, a writer is looking at those things, then they have way too much time on their hands.
It's always good to get my actor neuroses out, so that way we can
and
get
I love
them
that because it makes total sense.
Yeah. Okay.
But what I do when I send it in is I'll write I'll write scene 1, and then I'll put scene 1 alt.
Yes. Oh, okay. Interesting. Okay. Great.
And then I go, this is an alternative. Like, and I'll put the one, and I always send in the one that I think will be the most affecting. And sometimes I'll put a note in it, scene 1 alt angrier,
sure.
But that's just for me to communicate with people who have no context.
Sure.
But you can do take 1, take 2. I wouldn't do take 1 and take 9. And then we go like, what happened in the middle? But you can just write scene 1, and then you could put scene 1 alternative.
Okay. Yeah, that's good.
And then now you have 2 different versions, and now it all works to some extent.
Yes, I'm going to use alternative. I like the word alternative option.
Alternative. Yes.
Now, the next question is about eyeline questions. So we talked a little bit about how people can get like kind of chaotic and all of that stuff. I do see when I watch tapes, I feel that it is effective that if you're talking to somebody here and this is your eyeline for the main person you're talking to, and then you have somebody over here that's another person talking to, I try to put them just on either side of the camera just so that there's a differentiation or delineation. But I do find that my personal work has to be so strong if I'm going to use, I mean, in general, especially with self-tapes, but if I'm going to use it for the, if this person I'm actually talking to and this person is a Post-it note, right? That my personal relationship on the Post-it note has to be even stronger because I'm not actually having the person there in front of me, right? So what is your take on eye lines, doing sort of little choreographic sort of things to sort of help tell the story a little bit?
I don't care about eyelines. I don't anybody who cares. I've never had someone say, "Oh, they're not talking to different people. Where's their eye line?" The highest level work to me happens when you're talking to another human being. You just change your point of view. Now, it's one thing if you and I are having a conversation and then the waiter comes and says, "We're closing up now. We'd like you to check out." And I look up and go, "Yeah, be right with you. Thank you." Or most likely would just be, if I'm deeply in this, I might not even look. But if you're talking to two different people, if I'm going there, I'm talking to my lamp, and now I'm talking to a human, and now I'm talking to a lamb, it's going to show as being different. And nobody watching this really is sitting there going, "Oh, their eye lines are not differentiated." They're very likely, so I can be talking to another human being, and I'm now changing my point of view, and now I'm talking, it doesn't matter. If I'm talking to a human, I'm talking to a human, and that's the best thing I could be doing. Well, and I just say, talk to the human, always in the room, because I see actors come in the room and do that, and they're like, they have eye lines all over the place, and I'm like, you're talking to your imaginary friends, and I can tell that. But if you can change your relationship with the actor, the human you're talking to me, there's always a better connection, and most people are better at talking to other people. Now, I know that other people may disagree with me. Everything I'm saying is my point of view. But from my experience from 40 years of doing this and 10 years of heavy-duty self-taping, I always am affected by a person talking to a human.
Yeah, I feel like one of the things that I've heard, if you're in a scene with two people and you only have one person you're talking to whatever degree you can, make the two people one person, which sometimes is easier said than done depending on the writing, and sometimes it's harder. In the room, sometimes I have three people sitting in front of me, and there might be one that's talking, but sometimes I will talk to the one that's talking, and then even though the person over here is not the person I'm talking, or that's not talking back to me, I am talking to that person, so I'm still connecting with an actual person, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Right.
It's helpful though. It's helpful it's helpful to be talking to a human. And I just really encourage you to do that when you can, if you can. Changing eye lines and talking to imaginary people is one more obstacle in having human connection.
Yeah. I mean, what I hear you saying, which I so find to be true, is engagement, story. Is the story being told, and are you engaged and engaging in a human activity? Is there a clear relationship? Is there a clear point of view about what's going on? Is it personal to you?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And then is it telling the story?
Yeah.
Right? And then all the other stuff is other stuff. Yeah. Okay, great.
I'm just moving a little bit because the window is so bright beside me.
The light's great.
I wasn't supposed to be in that room, and now
here we are.
So it's kind of bizarre. I look a little bit like I'm in a crypt. But anyway, it's
Risa,
fun.
Don't worry about the background. Take your own advice. It's you.
No, I know.
Your human connection.
Yes, that's right.
Okay,
we're having a human connection.
That's right.
So I'm blown out in this. I'm going to just move.
Yeah. You got to do what you got to do.
And shut all this down. Okay,
so I have a question that somebody asked about tips for staying present in the scene. And I think this can be challenging, especially when people are moving on to Zooms and FaceTimes and things like that. Staying present in the scene. I find that acting, I find the fact that I'm standing in my living room, being blinded by the ring light. Okay, if the ring light is blinding you, we have to have another talk. And my dog's pacing, confused about who I'm talking to. Another thing, put the dogs in another room. It's so distracting. It's hard to stay checked into my scene. I can talk about that as an actor, and then maybe you can give some of what you notice. I mean, for me, if connection is king, and if being really engaged is what matters most, then you have to eliminate these distractions. No different than than a writer who needs to find a time and a space that they're consistently writing in so that they can feel like they can get the work done. That creating a space and an environment for yourself where you are able to be as connected as possible is of utmost certainty. And part of what I hope Self-Tape May does for everyone is it allows you to find out what you need. You know, somebody may be able to work well with a blinding ring light, but if the ring light is blinding you and it's distracting you, then you need to figure that out. There are lots of filters that you can put over ring lights. There's super cheap pieces of paper that you can put over a ring light to calm it down so that you have so you can see somebody. You can use a softbox instead of a ring light. Like all that stuff is available to you. You have to put the dogs in the room and you have to basically set yourself up to do your best work, however that looks.
Yeah. You know, it's so interesting. And I love that, you know, by the way, the ring light, the issue that I have sometimes is that I just moved. So it's hopefully our connection will be okay. But it's not as bright. I see the reflection in the ring light reflection in people's eyes and everybody starts to look zombie-like. So you have to, again, play around with it, try different things on, create a scenario, hopefully in your home, because as much as I'm certainly supportive of people going to studios, you can't really do that now. And sometimes it creates its own pressure, but try to find a way or a place where you just feel like have a neutral, supportive enough environment where you can do your stuff. And if the dogs can't go in another room, and if it's not the most conducive thing.
Listen, the dogs can go in the bathroom. Like, listen, put the dogs in the bathroom, put them in the tub, lock the door, do whatever you got to do.
But here's the thing. Some of this creates that kind of formality that gets in the way of showing up and just, dropping in. I am seeing like actors in my classes. Like last Thursday night, I have 2 actors in my classes, 2 women who are breastfeeding. And they couldn't come to class before because they just had babies. Now they're in class doing amazing work with a child at their breasts. And then another kid runs in to say goodbye, and good night. And they're in their pajamas and the kid is sitting and watching. And we try to make sure that we don't say, things that are inappropriate but it's a 3-year-old. And I'm realizing, like, it doesn't matter. That work was gorgeous. I don't care that there's a 4-year-old sitting next to them. I don't care that they're in their bedroom. I don't care that a dog is barking. I just care that they're present and they're connected and they've got clear intention and they're emotionally full and they're engaged in the story with another human being. That's the thing that's working. The rest of it is all distraction.
Yes, but if the distraction is distracting you, then I think it's upon the actor to do what they need to do to find the solutions to stop the distractions from distracting them, or find a way to focus through it.
Yes, and I get that. So what I would suggest is forget about performing. Do the scene with your dog and the ring light. Obviously, try to find it so it's not. And try doing the scene with a friend on FaceTime, and just try doing the scene where you're having a conversation. And the dog is there. Like, I just moved. I was totally listening to you. I had to move to a different space. We kept getting disconnected because of it must have been something with my phone because my daughter's phone is not having that.
Right.
But like, these things happen, but you just stay on story. Right? I would say do the scene with all those distractions and keep practicing a different way of working so you don't have to formally perform a scene that is perfect. If this, yes, I agree with you, totally. Make sure your environment is friendly and that is conducive to doing great work. And anything that distracts you from it, deal with that. But let's take all the formality and the craziness out of it so that you could do the scene even with the dog in the room.
Yeah, I mean, a great thing to try in Self-Tape May is if you have dogs and they're unruly, see like in what situations dogs can be added into the scene. If I'm a director and I'm at my friend's house, it's a scene where I'm at my friend's house having a conversation with my friend at my friend's house, like dogs can be a part of that universe. There's no reason why they can't be a part of that universe. So, experimenting with those things, seeing if they work, seeing how much distraction you can take. And it reminds me of, I listened to Shonda Rhimes' masterclass, and she talks about pitching. And she said the best advice she got is you should be able to do your pitch with blaringly loud music over you. And if you can do it through all of that, then you're going to be able to crush when you get in the room. right?
You know,
And-
that's brilliant, but it's also it's in that you're creating a state of presence for yourself, and that's what you want all the time. Because you know what's going to be really distracting? You're going to get the job, and you've been through this, Audrey, and many of you have. You get the job, you go to set.
Oh God!
There are 100 people running around. They're exhausted.
I know.
There's like the sun is blaring on everybody.
Yeah.
People want to go home. There's like to get turned around. The star of the show, who you're in the scene with, oh my God, I've waited this for my whole life, has to leave because they have a 12-hour turnaround. So now you're doing the scene with an ex that's on the camera and a very tired script supervisor just feeding you the lines, and you're told by the AD, listen, you get one take and we're out because we got to get to dinner, and like you are, and we're going into overtime, so you don't have much time, and everybody else is looking at you like, come on, let's get on with it, and talk about distractions.
100%.
And you need to be delivering.
Yeah.
So if people need to know that you can deliver, so yes, work with distractions, turn on the television. Somebody just said in a comment, but then at the end of the day, figure out for you. And I'm going to plug a second here because that's what we teach in our classes every single day. Figure out what it is for you that is going to get you present, dropped in, and connected to another human being. I keep saying that in the story. What is it going to be for you to create an environment that works for you, but also to get to the thing that matters most?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. I mean, somebody had said, your kids. And I think for me, what you're talking about, which is something I'm so passionate about, is everybody creating your own individualized personal audition technique, whatever that means for you, and you have the things that you have. So if you have kids, then you have kids. And you and I talk about this all the time. Like, the business doesn't care about you. It doesn't care about you. So it doesn't have a ton of empathy for any of it. So they want to see the work be done. However that happens, whatever you got to do to have the work be done is whatever you got to do to have the work be done. And, using practice time to discover what are some of the things that are distracting to you. What are some of the things that prevent you from doing work that you're less than satisfied with, whether that's preparation, whether that's distraction, whether that's environment, whether that is not a strong event, not a strong relationship, whatever it is, that you start to identify what doesn't work for you and what does work for you, and then consistently build upon that so that you know how to work in this very fast amount of time that we get in order to create our auditions.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And that's working, as a professional.
Yes.
Is figuring out your process, your practice.
That's right.
And I would say something about the self-tape made practice, and I think this is really important also, is start to play around with your practice.
I so agree.
Like, every time you do a self-tape, even if you want to give yourself like 5 things to work on, do one where you have distractions. Do one where you do it outside. Do one where you're talking to different eye lines. Do one where you're talking to a person in the room. Do one where you're talking to a person who's on your iPad or another device. Try out different things and see what works for you. It's like, I remember I went on this yoga weekend retreat, and I thought I was doing my yoga just fine. My downward dog was just fine. I've been doing it for a really long time.
Yeah.
I go to this retreat, and this teacher, God bless him, came over to me and just gently moved through some very specific things in my body to get me into what downward dog really meant. And it was just trying some things to help me and it was all about letting go.
Yes.
It was all about releasing to my, to the ground, all those things you hear, but then you're still trying to do it right, and you're doing it right. And then suddenly you just, oh my God, here I am. And letting go. And my practice changed forever because he gave me a few very simple tools to just drop into my practice completely differently. And that's what I would say is, like, try things on so you can then drop into your practice differently and start to find ease in this.
Yes.
The scene shouldn't be easy for you as a character.
No, but
it has to be. You have to find ease and joy and release and presence as an actor, as a human being, and that, if you can do that through your practice, through self-tape May and beyond, then you're going to start to take ownership of the work in a really different way. You're going to drop into that downward dog in a really different way.
It was a really big change in the development of my audition technique, was really truly realizing that it was mine and that I had to take ownership of my process, and that taking ownership of my process really does mean experimentation. It means like what works for me, you know, what, you know, how do I get the first 7 seconds to be really alive? How do I make sure that happens? You know, this question says, any tips for staying present? And so I will say some tips for me is I do really recommend, you know, I do a lot of prep work in terms of the event, like what's actually happening here, knowing what the story really is asking of this character and of this role. I do a lot of work in terms of relationship. I try to be very grounded in what the relationship is, what's the history of the relationship, and not the relationship that I'm talking about, but the relationship of the person I'm talking to. Both are important, but definitely the person I'm talking to is what this scene is about, right? Yeah. And then making sure that I have an understanding of what I personally bring to the role. What's exciting to me about this role? Why are you going to cast Audrey in this role? Because I can imagine a billion actors who could take this role. But it helps me to be present when I'm really present in like, this is what's going on. This is how I feel about it. And this is how I feel about the person I'm talking to.
That's huge.
Right? That's being present.
It's huge.
Right?
And that's being present. It also being present is letting go of preparation.
Yeah, right.
So it's like if you're an athlete, I've been watching the Michael Jordan documentary series on National. It's brilliant, and there you're looking at athletes. You're watching those athletes out on the court, and I liken that like I do with everything to actors.
Sure. Yeah.
And so if you want to be Michael Jordan and you want to go out on that court and play that game, or any of those guys, or any athlete, or any dancer, anybody who's physical, right? What you do is you have to let go of the practice.
Yes.
You have to say, we did all that. And you got to say, now whatever it is lives in me. And some of that speaks to preparation and
to deliberate practice, consistent practice.
Yeah. And so that you're well tuned and your acting muscles are well oiled, and so that you are in the practice of acting and self-taping and everything, and you it's developed. And so when you're an athlete, you go out on the field or on the court, or a dancer going out on stage, the last thing you're thinking about is, do I remember my lines? What did I decide was happening here? This is where I was supposed to sit. This is where I was supposed to be angry at her. This is where I was supposed to change my eye line. If you're worrying or thinking about that stuff, you're not present. Yeah. But present means letting go of all of that stuff and saying, I know this, it's in me, just like I know what I had for breakfast. This is just like I know what I feel about COVID, just like I know what I feel about abortion, just like what I know about what I feel about my brother-in-law. I know how I feel about that, and I know how I feel and believe in all the decisions I've made about the story, the characters, the relationship, and now I am going to just let it happen.
For me, what you're talking about is something I really preach, which is like, if I feel strongly that if you wait until you get the audition to be comfortable with self-taping, I think you're fucked. Like, you have to do the practice in order to then get the actual opportunity and have a sense of understanding of how you work and how this is to be comfortable with the actual audition. Because the actual audition is going to come with some, some excitement, maybe some anxiety, maybe some whatever that comes with actual appointments. And, pro athletes, pro Olympians, pro musicians, all of them, they're not waiting until they perform to be ready to perform.
Right. So it's what's your practice? I'm moving rooms again because I was losing you on the internet.
Yeah.
So it's what is your practice that gets you to a place where you can walk onto a self-tape or into an audition room or onto a virtual audition and just have the artistic authority to show up and be in this story.
Yes.
And that's the practice. I mean, that's the work of a professional. You know, that's your job, to take ownership of that practice and that experience. And some of it is changing how you might prepare.
Yes.
I see a lot of actors, really limit their preparation because they're worried about, memorizing words, and they're worried about sitting and standing and eye lines and all this other stuff. And it keeps you from the real work, which is to answer all of those questions about where this lives in you, what you're, we are interested in Audrey. We are interested in each of you and what you bring to this. And that's what's human and affecting and fascinating. Your version of this may not work for us, but we're definitely going to be affected by you if you are willing to, brave enough to bring yourself fully to this and say, this is my version of this. Because what other version do you have? I don't care if you're Meryl Streep or Viola Davis, or Kate Blanchett or Denzel Washington or, whomever. What's your version of this? It's like you decide and you say, this is me in the story. These are the decisions I've made for me in the story. And now I'm going to come in and live them. And that's what we're saying is live them in real time.
Absolutely.
And then you have then you're in the dance. And like, I love showing my favorite self-tapes in class because, as I said, it makes people realize,
it's that.
It's that. But the comment always is that person is ready to go to work. They're ready to go to wardrobe. So it's like, what work do you have to do so that you are ready for wardrobe, and all the other stuff is happening. And yeah, it's a lot for you to take on, to self-direct, to make all these decisions, to know how to edit, to know how to do your lighting, to know how to create your environment, to put the dog in the bathroom, to deal with finding a reader. I get all of that. But it's the alternative of driving an hour or being on this train for an hour or figuring out how you're going to get to the audition, then getting there, walking across the lot or wherever you are. And then now it's like an hour and a half from the time you left your house and your makeup is melting. And now and then going into the waiting room. And now they're telling you it's 45 more minutes and you can hear the auditions that are happening through the door. And then after, blah, blah, blah. And so an audition can then be 2 hours of preparation, an hour when you're there, and another hour and a half to get home. And that's your day. When you self-tape, you have to self-direct, or you can collaborate with other people. Sure. I know people who have amazing self-tape buddies and help each other through this and start to become better at self-directing because now they're working with each other and just saying, that spoke to me. But what about that when you said that line about, the baby, like it didn't sound like you knew about the baby that well. You didn't have a point of view about that, or and suddenly you're starting to build your own toolbox because you're helping other people do it.
Yes.
And you have more time to focus on the real work, and you don't have to worry about traffic. And I know lots of actors who are pretty sophisticated who would rather self.
Yeah, no, I know them too. 2 more questions, and so we can wrap up. Is it okay, or even better, to have our slate look like our headshot and then our self-tape have a look or feel of what we bring to the character? So a lot of people feel like, what's with the slate? The other question about the slate is, if the slate's at the top, does anyone ever sort of look at the slate and go, yeah, this person's not the role, and then not really watch the rest of the tape?
I don't think anybody's used a slate to dismiss somebody. Okay. And by the way, your slate can be just human. Do one right now, Audrey.
Hi, I'm Audrey Moore. I am 5'9" and I live in Los Angeles.
Okay, that's it right there.
That's it. Yeah.
But it was great.
What?
You had no time to make that formal.
Yeah.
You just spoke.
Yeah. Yes.
Like, God, you guys complicate it so much.
I know, right.
And you suddenly go, here's my slate. It has to be something. It doesn't. We just want to know you, right? And if it's going to be a full body thing, it's like, I get it. I know producers who want to see the human body because not they don't want to, look at your body. They just want to have a sense of you
100%.
Other than a talking head.
100%.
So it's like, that's what you say.
Yeah.
And just keep it human, keep it informal, keep it real. You're talking to remember you're talking to people. You're talking to people who are storytellers and who are trying to make sense of their script and their movie and their TV show and their series. And they don't know what it is. And so they are looking to you for leadership and authority. They're looking for to get to know you in their world and in their story and in their experience. So just be human, say hello, do what Audrey just did. It doesn't have to be more complicated than that. It really doesn't.
Great. So I'll just wrap up with some things that I feel like I learned that I think for those people who maybe didn't catch the beginning of this, I think the biggest takeaway is What matters most in your self-tapes is to be affected, to affect, to be present, engaged, engaging, tell the story. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And to stop, you know what? Stop feeling like you need to show you're acting.
I know, that's so real. Yeah, that's so
I mean,
real.
just be human.
I know.
Just
Yeah,
have a
that's so real.
conversation.
Yeah.
Just be present in the story. Like just,
Yeah.
and practice that with other people so that you get, you're doing, and the great thing about being in this new virtual space that we're in, and again, we're seeing this in our classes all the time, is that people are giving up performance in favor of conversation. They're giving up presentation in favor of human connection. They're giving up being it by themselves in the world in favor of being with another human being in the scene. And that's huge. And you start to get used to that. That is the new virtual experience, the new audition, the new self-tape is this lo-fi human experience. And if you start working in that way, there's a really good chance that you're going to be affected and you're going to be engaged in this wonderful story.
Yeah. And the other takeaway that I think I hear everybody say, which I just want to reiterate for those who maybe haven't gotten this memo, is, really make sure that you start strong. I mean, always starts, the whole thing should be strong, but that self-tapes do have a, something about the technical thing about them where somebody can stop, a few 5 to 10 seconds through. And so I encourage people in Self-Tape May to really watch other people's self-tapes, do your own, and see when people start strong, see what it is about them that they've started strong, and experiment ways with how you can start strong, whether that's improvising at the top, whether, like you said, that's getting into an emotional state, that's having a sense memory experience, whatever that is, so that you get present and engaged from the top and you don't wait for the scene to sort of get you in, because they're not going to get there.
Yeah. And so
Right.
and if your questions are, how do I do that? You practice it. You get friends to help you. You come to class.
That's right.
You are in a situation where you allow yourself to find all that. And presence is something that can be practiced and learned. And I just want to do a quick plug, if I may, for presence. Talking about presence. Because Steve, my partner, who's brilliant, we're doing these pop-up classes for $25 where half the money goes to first responders first. Great. And it's been an amazing thing. We do them every Friday. And Steve's doing one this Friday, which is about self-care and presence. And so if you want to do that, just go to the BGB website and you can figure out how to do that. It's $25 and you will come out changed. And you do, and again, it's like, and I learned that constantly, even this morning when I was getting ready to do this. My mind was in 15 different places. I had to stop and get quiet and go inside and meditate and get present and journal and allow myself to get with myself.
I mean, real.
And like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like we all have to keep working at this. So do some of that and allow yourself some space and be kind to yourself in all of this. And we're in a time right now where we are stressed and this is not normal. And we're in week 9 of quarantine, or isolation, and we're hearing it could be another 3 months. It could, who knows what it could be. So, we're all fragile right now and vulnerable. And I just recommend that you take this time to be also kind to yourself. And if you're going to practice self-taping, just do it from a place of love and connection and humanity.
Yes. And for me, experimentation. Do it from a place of this is the time to practice and experiment. You don't have to, perfection is not, for me, what this process is about. The process is about, developing your personal technique, developing what you need, experimenting with this, do these readers work well for you? Does this, thing work well for you? Does spending time with a script in this way work really well for you? And then practice and experiment and see what lands and see maybe what's exciting to you. And if you can get feedback from people you trust, see what's exciting to people out there.
Yeah. Yeah, because you're in collaboration. You're not
We're all
doing
in
this.
collaboration. Yeah, I mean, that's
Yeah.
the nature of what we do, right? It's in collaboration.
Yeah.
And we are in a position where it is going to be, 3 to 6 months until production really comes back to play. And, part of how this can be a blessing is really being able to take this time without feeling like we're missing out. So many of us feel like, we can't take the time to practice and experiment because we're behind and other people are getting jobs and we have to hurry up and get the jobs that everyone else is getting. And instead it's like, no, there's none of that happening right now. So now is a really beautiful time to experiment, to play, to refine, to finesse what it is you bring and how it is you bring it.
Yeah, beautiful. I love that.
Wonderful.
That's lovely. Thank you. Thank you for saying that.
Of course.
Yeah. And come to class,
Yay.
come play with us.
Yeah.
Only because, and I'm not saying this because we don't need actors, but
Yeah.
we want to
Yeah.
offer you this opportunity
Yes.
to work in this new virtual space in a way that's going to change the way you work forever. And it's going to blow your minds. It's blowing my mind
That's
in
awesome.
class. And I love what I'm seeing. And I went in a skeptic. And I came out, I'm like, oh my God,
Great.
this is it. This is the work. This is what we've been talking about and longing for. And now we're doing it. And we're not even in the same room as each other. But here we are
Yes.
having human conversations in the most empowering way. And it's keeping me mentally and emotionally and creatively healthy. And I just want that for all of you, to have that space to give that to yourselves, whatever that looks like for you. So, yeah.
So this is going to be posted in my live story feed. If I can find a way to share it with you, I will, Risa. And I just want to say, you have your class. Everyone check that out. The next episode of Audrey Helps Actors, we are specifically going to be talking about lighting and sound. So if that's a thing for people, Jesse grew up, his dad is one of the top gaffers in town. So nobody knows, his name is literally Lumen, named after the light measuring device named by his father, because that's what his life is. So we will be talking with somebody who knows about light, and sound, so that we're getting a lot of those technical questions. So we will discuss those in the podcast. And everyone stay in Self-Tape May. We're all so inspired. And thank you so much, Risa, for giving us your time and always your incredibly decades-long experience and perspective and care for actors. I really appreciate it.
You're very welcome, and thank you for everything that you do for actors. It's so necessary, and it's a great anchor in our community. So
Wonderful.
Brilliant. Love that. Thank you.
So next week on Audrey Helps Actors, OMG, we're going to discuss Story. Oh my God, I'm so excited. Story. I'm doing like floppy Muppet. Yay. I'm legit Kermit level excited about the Story episode. So we are going to talk story. This particular episode, I need you to go watch Finding Nemo. So go watch, rewatch Finding Nemo. Pay attention. Take notes if you want. We're going to be discussing casting, character arc, all of it as it relates to story. I'm very excited. All right, thank you so much to Risa Bramon Garcia. That is Risa Bramon Garcia over at the BGB studio. She is a veteran casting director and a longtime actor advocate. There's a couple of things that she wants to offer actors to know and be informed about. There is a Zoomcast. It's a casting director Zoomfest that you can sign up. It's at bramongarcia.com/cd/Zoomcast. I will put these links into the show notes for everyone to see. And there is also a guided meditation and writing exercise, which she briefly talked about. And Risa is going to be guiding people through that because being present in your career is so important. Both of these things are things that I really recommend taking advantage of, right now, getting information from casting, getting present, being in your body, being focused. That's all really valuable always, but especially now more than ever. Thank you all again so much. Many blessings to you. Big thanks to Thomas Hank Snodgrass. He doesn't live across the street anymore, but luckily the internet exists. And also to my executive producer and husband, still so handsome, you guys, Jesse Lumen, the one, the only, the rock star. Show music is brought to you by Ari De Niro. And And our theme song assistance is still brought to you by Aalok Mehta and 108 Hill. Don't forget your towel. You need it now. You guys need that towel. A lot of you guys have your towel on you, I can see. Very good.